Hello, this is Mike Van Meter, and welcome to the Recovery is Possible podcast. And I want to thank you for joining me. You can reach us at our Facebook site, which is also called Recovery is Possible, or our website, which is VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com. And this episode is sponsored by FHE Health, a substance abuse and mental health treatment center specializing in treatment for first responders' needs, including PTSD, anxiety, and substance use. So take the first steps to a better life today by visiting FHEHealth.com. Folks, today, this is a special day because today happens to be the 100th episode of Recovery is Possible. And I want to thank all of you for listening to this podcast. And it's been special for me and everybody in my world. And I'll tell you, there are times when you sit back and you wonder if you're doing the right thing, if you're helping anyone. And it just so happens that this evening, as we were sitting down to do this podcast, I had a call from a friend of mine that he wanted to let me know that he was listening to one of these episodes and heard something that really appealed to him. And in fact, the comment in one of the episodes was, treatment gets you to stop drinking, but the 12 steps help you not start drinking. And for whatever reason, that was a message that this particular individual needed to hear, and it resonated with. And I tell you, that was so special to hear that, because in the times when you wonder if you're on the right direction, the right path, if it matters, if it if you're reaching anyone, then you get a phone call like that, and it just kind of puts the wind back in your sails to keep doing this type of work. And this episode, I wanted to reflect on these 100 episodes, and this is the third season of Recovery is Possible, and just kind of talk about sort of the evolution of the program, some of the things that we've done, some of the things that I want to look at in the future and work on, and just the overall effect of the whole thing in recovery in general. Because I think that's something that it's important to do, particularly in recovery, is to go back and reflect on the past, look at what went well, what didn't go well, where do we want to go in the future, and have that plan. Along those lines, I have someone with me that was a guest on this podcast. Actually, is episode number 1. She is episode number 1, and there's another episode where she's talked about family programs. So in episode 1, she talked about her story with her husband, and then later she talked about Al-Anon and the other family programs that are out there. So if you haven't heard those, this is Lillie, and Lillie was a guest before. Check those episodes out. So with that, Lillie, thanks for coming back on the program.
Thanks, Mike. Can't imagine it's been 100 episodes. Congratulations. That's awesome.
I know. You didn't bring me a cake or anything?
No, sorry.
Okay, maybe you can make it. Maybe the 200th episode, we can do it.
There you go.
And by the way, we are also getting ready to approach, I think, over 10,000 downloads, which is amazing. And I want to start off with, one of the things that hit me, this whole podcasting business is new to me. I'd never done it before. I didn't even know what a podcast was, frankly, until we started this. And what hit me, Lillie, was the breadth, the reach this sort of a platform happens. I can see where people are downloading the podcast, not only across the United States, which is really what I was thinking about, because I live in the United States, but I didn't realize how many people around the world listen to this program. That's astounding to me. And that just means that there's an interest. This program's not advertised around the world. It just means that people have to go look for this. They have to go looking for this topic and then dial into this particular podcast. And that stunned me at how important this message is and how much hunger there is to hear this sort of message. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Mike, I think you're absolutely right. I was just talking to a friend who's in the program with me, and we were talking about how COVID has really made an impact on society. And with that has been a hunger for podcasts and just having various mediums to be able to be in contact with other people. I mean, during COVID, we were all isolated. And I know in your case, you started up the podcast during COVID, and it's not just your podcast; it's just podcasts in general.
Right.
And I think that's good. We were not meant to be isolated, to be alone. And so these avenues, using technology as a means to be able to reach out and communicate with other people, and then to find out what's going on with them at their deepest levels. Sometimes we have conversations that are very surface level, but the podcasts have given you an opportunity to talk about a lot of things that really touch folks' lives that are happening behind closed doors, and having someone that you can listen to, that you feel that you identify with. And then what's nice about the podcast is you can always hit the rewind button. Mm-hmm. And, I missed that. Let me go ahead and listen to that again. And
you can send it, you can forward it on to other people. You can, like you say, save it, re-listen to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. And so I know that I've listened to quite a few of your podcasts, and you've had a variation of many, many different kind of guests. I mean, you've had CEOs of treatment centers all the way to individuals who are early in recovery, to clinicians, to, just a whole gamut of different people that you've affected, that you've been affected by. And I know for me, I've really been touched and positively affected by your podcast. So I thank you for that.
Was there any particular episode that stuck out? I mean, there's a wide variety, like you've said, of, we even had somebody that their story was made into a Hollywood movie. We have the sheriff's deputies out in New Mexico that are rowing across the Atlantic this coming year. They're in training for that now to raise awareness about suicide. Just a gamut of episodes out there. So if you're new to this program, there's a lot of material, a lot of diverse material that you can listen to. It's all related to recovery, but diverse in that field. Anything that stands out to you that really meant a lot? Other than your own, other than the one that you were in.
Yeah, but the one that actually haven't listened, to be honest, to all of your podcasts, but one particular one that I've been interested in is you had a therapist that was on your program, and she was explaining EMDR.
Oh yeah.
And she had been teaching it
Helen.
for a while, and so I had a recent episode in my particular family where we had a death in the family. And so it triggered some thoughts in me. So I had heard about EMDR, but more just from an educational perspective. But then we had a death in our family, and it had triggered some thoughts in me that had occurred 20 plus years ago. And I actually had an opportunity to see a therapist, and she walked me through EMDR.
Oh, you did it. You did it yourself. Okay.
I actually did it myself with the help of a therapist who specialized in it. And having gone through it and physically actually doing it myself, it was powerful. But by you having that therapist talk about it, introduce it, it made the idea of doing it less threatening. And so I thought, here's an expert. And she talked in a way that it made sense to me. And so when I started having these triggers based on the death of our family member, it opened the doors. I was much more open, receptive to actually trying it. And I was amazed firsthand of how effective it is.
Yeah. For our listeners that may not know what EMDR is, and that's eye movement reprocessing desensitization, that's what it stands for. That's kind of a complicated title. It actually took me a while to even be able to pronounce that, EMDR. Kind of walk us through that. What were the things that your therapist told you about? What is it for? And, a lot of our listeners may not even know what that is. They've never even heard that term. So just kind of like the Cliff Note version of why is it? What is it?
So I could only walk you through in terms of my own experience. And so in my particular instant, the event that had happened with the loss of our loved one was triggering thoughts that had happened to me, like I was mentioning, 20 plus years ago. And so that is what prompted me to go to this therapist. But so she asked me, she said, sometimes she'll have patients who want to just deep dive and just go into that very traumatic episode. Because she explained to me that trauma is trauma. Your body doesn't remember or know or distinguish whether something is a little trauma or a big trauma. It's just trauma. And so, but if the idea is to go back into your memories, and how your past is affecting your present. And so I was not one of those folks, oh yeah, sure, let's go deep dive and hit the most impactful and big traumas. So she said, well, maybe you can find an event that you would be willing to go through just to get familiar with EMDR.
A different event, not the event that brought you in there.
Yes.
You're saying a separate event.
Separate event, but something that
almost like a test run.
Almost like a test run. And so I now teach for a living. It's in a college. And so one thing I had mentioned to her, I said, sometimes whenever I'm teaching in front of the students, if I feel that I'm not doing well or I'm not connecting well with the students, I feel like this, I feel nervous, like there's a pit in my stomach, there's tension in my neck, maybe some achy feeling in the back of in the middle of my back. And I'll start to sweat a little bit. And it's this nervousness of being in front of students. And I feel like I'm being condemned or being criticized. And so she said, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about that. And so she was asking me a series of questions in order to get me to home in on this event that happened in my past that was creating some physical discomfort while I was in the classroom. So then she asked me a series of questions, and she said, well, maybe we could talk about that, to use that as a stepping stone in terms of getting you familiar with EMDR. So the idea, and because she asked me the question, Lillie, do you even know what EMDR is? And I said, well, I believe, based on the podcast that you had, and I'm paraphrasing, it's a type of therapy where the therapist walks you through a past event, and the idea being is she safely walks you back in time, and then you remember the event in a safe manner where she neutralizes it. So it becomes a memory, and only a memory. You're not having all the emotional trauma and all the physical effects and emotional effects of the event. It just becomes a memory, just like, oh, I went to fourth grade, or something like that. That's innocuous, and it's just a straight memory. So that's what she was going to try to do, was to walk me through an event that would have triggered me, but to remove the trigger. Mm-hmm. And so the event that we selected was, she walked me through. We said, let's pick that as the event that we're gonna use. And so it was totally online. She wanted to make sure that I had headphones on, a computer screen that was in front of me.
Oh, this was not in person. This was online.
Yeah,
okay.
Especially with COVID. They're able to do it online. So I sat in front of a computer with a screen at eye level, and she tried to, so initially there was these little like balls that would go across the screen, and they would make sounds like tick, 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 tick. And they were at a steady pace. And she had me look at the balls at the same time tapping either my shoulders or tapping my knees, whatever was comfortable. Mm-hmm. But I noticed that for me, my eyes would get all cross-eyed, and I was getting disoriented mm-hmm. by watching these balls. So she said, well, let's not do that. So let's just have you close your eyes, and you're going to hear a tone that goes from your left ear to your right ear at a steady pace. And I want you to tap according to what you hear in the headphones. And we're going to do that like 12 times for a count of 24, right, left, until you hit 24. And then we're going to do some breathing. And the idea is to get your heart rate down to a level where you're just relaxed. And when you feel no pain throughout your body, because then I know that you're relaxed, then we're going to start the process. So we did that a few times, and then she would ask me to talk about the event, and then she would she would ask me to describe it, and then at some point she would stop me, and then she would say, "Okay, let's go ahead and do the tapping and then the tones." So she would just have me go a little bit further, stop me, talk about the event, stop me, do the tapping, and I think the idea was to not allow me to get too emotional, and then just steadily walk me through the event. And what was interesting in my particular case, we probably did it for about 30 minutes. What is so interesting, Mike, was when I first remembered the event, all I remembered was feeling that there was this teacher who would yell at us when I was younger, right? But then as she was walking me through my memory, I could visually see myself in the room. I could visually see the wooden desk. I could visually see the windows to my left. I could see students to my left. I was sitting towards the back of the room, and I could hear the teacher's voice behind me. I started remembering all of that. She said, your body doesn't forget. And so as she recounted the whole event, I realized that she had, prior to getting to me, because I was at the back of the classroom, she had asked 2 other girls ahead of me to read. We were reading out of a book, and by that time I could, in my mind's eye, I could physically see the book and the words on the page. And as she was walking me through, I was able to recall that she had one girl read. She wasn't speaking loud enough, and so the teacher was telling her to speak louder. And then she went to the next girl. Maybe it skipped a few people, and this girl wasn't speaking loud, and so she was saying, you need to speak louder. So I was already getting nervous because she was somewhat yelling at the girls who weren't speaking loud enough. By the time she came to me, I was a soft, quiet child, and I'm reading, and she's like, you're not speaking loud enough, speak louder. And then I felt embarrassed, and I started crying. And she said, stop crying, read louder. So I started crying. And after she had stopped me, and then, we started doing the tapping, and then she got me in a state of calmness, she said, what's interesting with you is as I brought you back, you started talking like a little girl.
Interesting.
And I felt the same feelings as when I was in that classroom. But the first thing after she started talking, and we were talking through the event, aha moment came up where I'm like, excuse my words, I won't cuss, but B word, right?
Yeah.
It made me realize that teacher was abusive. Here I am, a little girl, and I'm learning how to read. Well, I know how to read, but she's reprimanding and yelling at me rather than teaching me how to speak clearly, and rather than being loving and kind. She was mean and abusive. And she did it to the other 2 girls, but she was especially abusive to me by yelling at me while I'm crying. So anyway, as she walked me through, and she tried to calm me, and then, using the tapping method, and she would not release me until all the pain in the back of my neck, my lower back, the pit of my stomach had gone away. But what I found from that was it wasn't my fault. It was that teacher's fault. She was a poor teacher. But yet that memory, I don't even remember the teacher anymore, but the way she made me feel was the same feeling that I had when I was in the classroom. And what's interesting is I've taught a couple more times since that event. That angst feeling that I had prior to me doing EMDR with her is gone.
Really?
Yeah. It's amazing.
Now, this is effective for you, and I know the people that I've spoken with, they have done EMDR and it's worked for. They say it's a miracle, but it doesn't work for everybody, though, does it?
I don't think so, and I think that it depends. Like they say, I think that she even said it might take 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. It's not like a miracle drug where the first time you do it, but for me, maybe it's because I was able to isolate it to one particular event, and I was willing to be, I was willing to be involved in it and to allow her to bring me back there. I think that's one of the reasons why it was so effective.
So in full disclosure, I tried EMDR early on in recovery. I did not find it effective. Now, it'd be interesting if I went back and did it now, because when I did it, I have to say, I think it was at that point where I wasn't sure if I wanted to get well. I kind of went because I felt like I had to. It was one of those things that I think it was just kind of like checking the box. I don't know how seriously I took it. And one of the key takeaways that I have seen, not only with what you're talking about, but patients I work with and myself, is you have to have a willingness to want to get well. If you don't want to get well, you're not going to get well. And that's in the years that I've been doing this and in my own walk and all the people that I've talked to throughout the years, the people that don't want to get well don't. They just don't. And so I think it sounds like that was a big factor with you, is you wanted this to work. So not surprisingly, it worked. Do you agree with that?
I agree. There was no one who asked me to go see a therapist. I did it on my own. She had asked me, I went with her because I was having these traumatic thoughts, but she was the one that said, oh, well, maybe because they do like cognitive behavior therapy. There's different types of therapies you can do, but she was the one that introduced. I think that in this particular instance, I think EMDR would be quite effective. Would you like to try it? And because of the fact you had that episode and your guest on there, I had listened to her, then I'm like, sure, I'd be receptive to it. So that was, it's like all these things had fallen into place to make it perfect for me to be willing to do what I did.
Yeah. So listening to that episode, you found that helpful,
Very
of educational?
Helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's fantastic. So check that out, EMDR, if it's something that you think that will apply to you if you're listening to this. Because when we talk about addiction, causes and conditions, right? The condition is that we have a genetic pre-upload and predisposition towards addiction, but it's things that happen in our lives that want us to go to the addiction to check out. We don't want to be present. Ultimately, that's what addiction is, not wanting to be present in the pain that's happened. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. You don't go to a 12-step meetings. I just spent a year interning in a treatment facility, and not one patient, not one came into the facility and talked to us and said, you know why I'm here? My life was going so well. I got up every morning and there were unicorns everywhere. The sky was blue. It was 70 degrees out, and I got to eat Skittles for breakfast and not get fat or get diabetes. So life was good. And life was so good, I thought I would come here into the treatment center and talk to you nice folks for the next 28 days about my addiction. That never happened. We never had those conversations. It was always pain, trauma, unhappiness, bitterness, resentments. That's what causes people to come in. And you can stop drinking or drugging. And if you're listening to this podcast, there's probably a reason why you're listening to this podcast. It's either you or someone that you know, your loved one, that needs help. And we can get them to stop for a period. But ultimately, if whatever that cause is not addressed, then you will likely go back, they will likely go back to what brought them here in the first place. And it is important, like if your loved one goes to a 28-day treatment facility or a detox or a 90-day facility or longer, you can go to treatment longer, or they go to a sober house. We have a saying in recovery, and that is the same person will drink or drug again. So we have to work on that person and change whatever it is, whatever that loop is that's causing them to go back. That must be addressed, or it's just a matter of time before they're back to drinking or drugging. There are a lot of tools out there. EMDR is just one of them, and it is effective. We always say, don't, condemnation prior to thorough investigation. Don't just assume something isn't going to work. Give it a shot. There are a lot of techniques out there that are useful, and it sounds, Lillie, like this was effective for you. And I've known a lot of, my world is mainly first responders. A lot of first responders say that it works. There's other things, meditation. I know you're into, and I'll have you talk about that. Mindfulness, meditation, acupuncture, yoga. getting into exercise programs. That's very helpful because usually when people get deep into the recovery, all of those things are out the window to include exercise. That is a tool that can be used to assist in recovery. And I've talked about that in other podcasts. But you in your teaching, because Lillie, you mentioned that you are now an instructor. I know you've really gotten into mindfulness, meditation, relaxation, those types of things, because you kind of suffer from anxiety and you tend to be stressed as well. We're in the Washington, D.C. area, and this is, if you guys aren't familiar with it, this is a high-stress place to begin with. But maybe touch on some of those other things. So EMDR, but you're using other things as well. What are you using?
Yeah, so, it's a really good point, Mike. You were saying that, you have the alcoholic or the drug addict, they've been self-medicating themselves in order to deal with the stresses in their life. And so I know that you've talked about the meditation, and there's different things that the treatment center that you work at offers a lot of ways to soothe yourself, right? Instead of using a drug, you've got to replace it with something that's more healthy, whether it's exercise or meditation or
proper sleep hygiene, things like that.
Yeah, but you know what? From a
diet,
from a family member's perspective, the same thing that you're expecting the alcoholic or the drug addict to do it, even in my circles within the family program, the same thing has to apply. We also need to exercise. I mean, because typically before the alcoholic, when we're living with an active alcoholic or an active drug addict, we are so obsessed over them that we stop taking care of ourselves. Well, in the program, we talk about taking care of yourself, putting yourself number one. When the mask comes down from the airplane, you put on yourself before you give it to your child. So meditation, exercise, getting appropriate sleep. You hear about not being hangry, using the principles of HALT. I try to avoid being hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. I've picked up there's a I'm not endorsing it, but it's a program that I use. It's the Calm app. I actually saw a commercial on it for the very first time, and but there's other programs that are out there that help you with breathing exercises, along with learning how to meditate. Just ways to, in a healthy way, soothe yourself. Instead of relying on some substance or process addiction or something else that's out there that that's not healthy. Mm-hmm. And so I've certainly have I have a sleep app that records, because I've been diagnosed with sleep apnea, mm-hmm. and then so I want to be able to analyze the quality of my sleep. So I use that app so I can see. And I can also provide it to my doctor too. So sleeping is so important to me. Exercise. COVID has not been friendly to me. I have not been as active as I have wanted to, but luckily with the weather getting warmer, I'm picking up some sports that I enjoy, doing meditation. And when I'm at work, just not being glued to the computer screen for 8 hours on end. Mm-hmm. I have some folks will have a Pomodoro timer. So every hour on the hour, or some people put it 20 minutes. So at every 20 minutes, you get up for 20 seconds, you look 20 feet away, put your arms up, counter things, in terms of trying to counter the effects of sitting too long. So some really concrete things to just get that blood circulation and just, be a little bit more healthy. And I know that at my work, they have meditation Mondays. They have, especially with COVID, they're really focusing on the mental health, your mental state, and then just focusing on mind, body, and spirit.
Mm-hmm. I like that, mind, body, and spirit. And what are you talked about COVID and the lockdown. Now you're more on the family side of the addiction, helping the family members who have their loved ones that are suffering from this. What was the big trend? I'm going to be doing a lot of talking about what my impressions are on the effects of COVID and how it's affected the recovery community over the last couple of years. That's kind of a direction I'm going to go in this next year. But from the family perspective, what are you seeing?
So I sat down today and spent, a good 4 hours with a dear friend of mine that I haven't seen in a couple of years because of COVID.
Last time you saw her was pre-COVID.
Yeah, it was pre-COVID. And so we sat down and she's been doing some wonderful things since I last saw her. And one of the things I did not know is that Al-Anon, the headquarters is in Virginia Beach. And, prior to...
I actually didn't know that.
And prior to that, most of the meetings in the DC area, over 150 meetings just in this area alone.
Per day.
I don't know if they're meeting per day, but there's just 150 meetings that have registered with Al-Anon headquarters. And so she was telling me, though, that pre-COVID, most of the meetings in our area were in person. There were a few telephone ones and maybe online. But when COVID hit, we went all online.
Yeah, they were shut down.
Yeah, and so she said to me that Al-Anon, they used to have district meetings, meaning like in a particular area, like I was in a particular district, that there were like 10 meetings that met that week that fell under that district. Well, because of COVID, they now have regions, like they have meetings that are solely with the intent of being online all the time. So they actually have group reps who are of regions because they are considered non-geographical meetings. She said she went to a meeting where there were, I don't know if it was, she went to a meeting, there were 500 attendees all around the world. So it has opened up. There are good things that have come about, from COVID in the respect in this particular case. Whoever thought that we would have church that would be streamed, like all over the place, right? Or meetings that you would have 500 members and Al-Anon would expand globally far more than it did even prior to COVID. So I was not aware that all that was going on. I think that's wonderful. Absolutely.
It is. It's wonderful, but there's some downsides to that too. Talk about the downsides.
Well, I think the downsides, I think, especially if you're, nothing beats being in person. Like one of the classes that I teach is on communication, having constructive conversation. And part of that is how important nonverbal communication is as part of your conversation. And so many times, if you have a big meeting and everyone, no one has their camera on, you don't know if they're really listening. And so the meetings that I have that are in person, we all turn our cameras on. I think it's important. And plus, if somebody drops in and you don't know who they are, it kind of makes you uncomfortable, right? Especially if you're talking about deep things. And so the meetings that I go to, they are online, but everyone has their camera on, and that makes a difference. And so I think that you have to have some sort of, if you're going to do it online, you've got to have some sort of rule set. And if you want to maximize your conversation and people feel psychologically safe, you need to set it up such that it's conducive where they feel safe to share.
Now, what do you do with the person that just feels so, and it's true in recovery meetings as well. Do you have those people that just feel so ashamed that they don't want to, they think, oh, somebody might recognize me or they'll see me, and they insist on, I'm not turning on my camera. What do you do with them?
I actually haven't had a situation like that, Mike, because most people will have their cameras on, at least for us.
I've seen it in recovery meetings, though.
So what have they done in your particular case?
Well, and if you're new to this world, the recovery world, this is not a shaming place. It's not a place that people are hurting enough, and we don't want to create any more harm. The meetings I've been at where that was the case, and we had one individual that for nearly a year wouldn't show his face, but we all understand. I mean, we've all been in that place, and they're very gracious and just let it go. It's not become an issue. I think that in the future, now that this seems to be sort of the norm to do Zoom meetings or distant meetings like that, I think it may have to be addressed down the road, because eventually you're going to have somebody that says, that makes me that person, I've never seen their face before, I don't really know who they are. You're going to have to set up a rule. Now, I'll tell you something that I heard the other day, and this is something that will have to be addressed. And if you're not familiar with 12-step meetings, they have what's known as a group conscious, meaning the group as a group will decide there's certain rules that are going to apply that's specific to that particular meeting. I had an individual say to me recently that they were on a meeting, an AA meeting, and they were the speaker of the meeting. It was a speaker's meeting. And somebody in the group recorded the meeting without getting permission to do so. And then this individual found out later that person shared what this person said, and they were telling their story. He shared it with some people. I'm sure with good intentions. They probably thought that message was going to help whoever they sent it to, but they didn't get their permission. The person that was speaking did not know that they were being recorded. That, I think, is going to be the bigger issue going down the road. But again, I think that's something that each individual meeting will have to address and put that in their rules, in the group rules. But that could become problematic. Remember, this particular group is Alcoholics Anonymous. It's Alcoholics Anonymous, and we don't share things outside the meetings. And that's fairly easy to control when we're face-to-face. But when we get outside of that space, that becomes, how do you regulate that? How do you control that? You really can't. And that's the danger. So, like I say, the Zoom meetings are good and bad. And I think some of the worst we haven't seen yet. Down the road, 10 years from now, we're probably going to hear of stories where things really went off the rails. So I'm glad to hear that you haven't run into that yet, but you're starting to see it somewhat at recovery meetings. I think that just a good rule of thumb, and now that when I'm on the Zoom meetings, I think I just assume, maybe a good rule of thought, we used to hear this all the time. Just assume whatever you're going to write is going to be public. Every email and every text that you send to someone, if you put it through the filter of, what if this was put on the internet and this was made public? Would I say what I'm about to say? Think about that. Maybe that's where we're going with this whole Zoom business. But there is a lot of good that comes out of it. I've gone to meetings around the country. I've gone to meetings in the United Kingdom. Other countries, people from other countries have attended meetings that I've been at here in the United States. That was something that was unheard of prior to COVID. It's just a new landscape. These are things that the co-founders of AA could have never envisioned, in the 1930s. They could have never envisioned this stuff. So...
yeah, I think that, like in our particular case, I think that because if someone were to attend, everyone has their cameras. So maybe they may show up not having theirs and just by process of just natural elimination, they don't feel comfortable. But I mean, we don't tell someone you must have it on. It's just naturally happens that way. Mm-hmm.
So this podcast, you are the 100th episode.
Thank you.
And so it's a special time. Have you had spoken with anyone that has listened to this podcast and gotten anything particular out of it that meant something to them? I can tell you, when I look at the number of downloads, guess what the most downloaded episode is? You.
Oh, well, interesting.
Number one. It is interesting because this is a recovery podcast, but interestingly, the most downloaded episode is one where you are talking about your experience with your loved one, whereas the whole gist of this podcast is for the addict themselves. So it just shows me that there's a real fire out there for people to know what to do with their loved ones.
Well, I think that you and I have talked about in the past that in the Metroplex in the DC area, there are over, well, at least back when I I looked into it. There were over 300 meetings of AA meetings and only 150 Al-Anon meetings. So what does that tell you? Because for every alcoholic, they're affecting 3 to 5, triple the amount of number
I've actually
of people.
heard average 7 people are deeply affected.
So that means if there's 300 AA meetings, there ought to be 2,100 Al-Anon meetings, but there's fewer. And I think that, it's a shame. It really is a shame. But unfortunately, what I have found is some of them end up being in the meetings, but many of them just leave. And because living with an active alcoholic or a drug addict is extremely difficult. You love this person, but yet they are choosing not to get help. And that's part of the disease. It's the disease, like you mentioned, it's the disease that tells you that you don't have a disease. And so the person who needs to get help is in total denial, but they're drugged. But the family member sees it all, remembers it all, and they love this person so much, but the person who's under the influence doesn't want to get help. So who wouldn't be frustrated from that? And so they leave. And so they're not going to go to a meeting. They're going to leave. And so it's a shame that it is that way. But I think that, the podcast you have, it educates people. It's meant to take away the stigma, to educate the public in terms of what is addiction. And so from a family member's perspective, it helps to answer some of those questions that they have, right? And it doesn't make it any easier to live with active addiction or, drug addiction or alcoholism or drug addiction, but it makes it for me, at least, it helps to answer some of those questions, that I'm not just suffering for nothing. My loved one is not thinking straight. So I may not necessarily need to be in the same room with them. I may need to detach, go get a massage or leave the house, or, right, to decompress from it. It doesn't make it any easier, but at least it answers some questions instead of being so frustrated and say, I just don't understand.
I think what's frustrating about it is addiction. It's the behavior of addiction that we are very frustrated with.
Yes.
And that's why it's hard for people to wrap the idea that this is a disease. When we talk about moral behaviors, it's the behavior that comes out of the disease that really people are focused on, as opposed to the disease itself. And the problem with that is that this is really the number one killer in the United States. I know we just went through 2 years of COVID. COVID hasn't even come close to killing the number of people that addiction has, not even close. And then when you factor in the destroyed lives and the crime and the, all of the byproducts that come out of addiction, this is really the problem that we have. But yet it's not talked about in society. On Capitol Hill, it's not addressed. The president did address it in the State of the Union. President Biden just talked about how opiates are a pandemic, an epidemic, rather, is the phrase that he used. So it's addressed in the State of the Union speech, but yet we point out that we all know what the problem is, and it was pointed out in that speech. But we don't really hear a lot about is the solution. All right, we know what the problem is, but what are we going to do about the problem? And nobody really talks about that. Or they talk in code and they don't get into specifics. And I think a lot of the reason behind that is people don't really know what to do about it, particularly our legislators. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to do with the families. And consequently, we're sending the wrong message. We're legalizing marijuana. We're lifting penalties for different criminal activities, and that's a whole another debate, and it gets rather political. And I'm not even taking a political stance. I'm just saying that the politicians that you hear talk about addiction are not educated in addiction, and that's for both parties. I'm not pointing any fingers at one particular party, because I can talk to any political candidate, and they're not really educated in this area. What that means is, for the public, they get mixed messages. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. They feel helpless in all of this. They feel ashamed. What can we do for the public other than this? One of the reasons we do this podcast is to educate as much as we can. But is there anything besides this education that we can do that you're seeing? Have you thought about that?
Well, Mike, let me ask you. I know that you're the host, but you just, like you had mentioned, you just completed your internship at a treatment center, and based on you having been there for 3 semesters. Was there any aha moment for you? Because you see these patients coming through and you're working with them, and it's not just law enforcement, or it's the public. Oh, yeah. No. The facility that I was at was not, we did have law enforcement people come through, but that was not the focus. This center was the public. Oh, okay. Oh, no, but like you were saying, it's like this, is there something more that we can do when the patients come through? Are they also very confused? Absolutely, and good question. I think my aha moment was this. Let me tell you something. Let me digress a minute and show some ignorance on my part, naivety on my part. When I went back to school to become licensed as a clinician, I thought going into the addiction field that I would need an addiction degree, right, in order to do this work. And when I got to my site where I was doing my internship, by the staff, I was asked, "Oh, well, what program are you in?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, what program am I in? What are you studying?" And I'm like, "I'm studying addictions and co-occurring disorders." "Oh, okay. So you're not being trained to be a social worker?" "No, I'm being," and I can see by your reaction, you're kind of stunned by that as well. And I'm like, "No, I'm trained to become an addiction counselor." Why? And what I didn't realize was that there's many different paths where you can work in an addictions facility and actually not study addictions. You can study social work. Now, without opening a Pandora's box into how complicated that can become, and there is a very large debate about the wisdom behind that and why that is done. But I didn't realize that going into the field. Now, let me tell you what that means. What it means, what you're talking about, somebody that's an addictions counselor, like somebody who's specifically trained, like I am, in addictions. The focus is on the addiction. So you come to a 28-day facility. Your presenting issue is drugs, alcohol, or all the above, right? That's why you're there. Now, while you're there, we are going to look into other issues. Maybe you got family issues. Maybe you have some mental health issues. Maybe you have legal issues. Maybe you have family of origin issues, all those different things. Those need to be addressed. But they're not going to be addressed in those 28 days with us. You're coming to us to get you to stop drinking or drugging, to put you in a position where you can effectively deal with your mental health issues. Because after all, if you're drinking all day, smoking crack, or heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, whatever, you're dumping all that into your system. How do we know what mental health issue you have? Because it's being masked by all of your drug use, right? So we have to get you off of the drugs to look at, maybe you don't have any mental health issues. Maybe you do, but we really don't know. That's kind of how I look at this. If you are somebody that comes in with any other training, then your focus is not going to be on drugs and alcohol. Your focus is going to be, hey, you know why you drink? It's because you were poor growing up. You know why you drink? Because you were systemically oppressed, because you're a particular, worldview, ethnicity, color, those types of things. And again, I'm not getting into debate whether that's good or bad. I'm saying it's different. And
that determines where the emphasis on your treatment is going to be over the next 28 days. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so for me, my key takeaway from the year that I was in the internship is, to me, this is just Mike's opinion, I think that dilutes the whole issue, because I believe that if you are coming into a 28-day treatment facility, first and foremost, we have to stop the bleeding, so to speak. You came in because of your drugs and alcohol. We must address that, because if we don't, the likelihood of you successfully addressing any of these other issues is slim to none. Okay? Because I can't have you effectively deal with your family of origin issues, or the fact that you feel like you're being oppressed because of your sexual orientation or your skin color, things like that, but continue to drink. Right? I to me, that's putting another issue, a side issue. I think the social work comes in later. I think that's very, very important, but we've got to deal with the acute. The reason why I'm saying this, it goes back to your original question, is it confused? Is this process confusing the patients? And I would say my experience, my takeaway, my impression is yes, it is very confusing to the patients. Does that address your question?
So I was asking that when you have patients who come into the treatment center, they are also very confused about what addiction is. Do they know what addiction is? Not always.
Not always. And I do a lot of training about the disease model versus the moral model, moral disease. Are you drinking because you're a bad, immoral person, or are you drinking because you have a disease? If you've listened to this podcast, I lean towards the disease model. And I have to do a lot of reprogramming and educating the patient, because a lot of times when we talk about this, it's the first time the patient has ever heard that. The problem is that they leave the treatment center and intellectually they will understand, yes, I have a disease, but then they go back out into a society that still looks at what they have as being a moral issue. So intellectually they can believe it, but in practice they don't believe it. And then we go back to, I'm doing, because I hear this all the time, man, I know I messed up. I know that if I was a crappy father or a crappy, husband, I understand. That's going back into the moral. You're putting moral blame on this. And so, I'll talk to them about the disease, but then they go back to, yeah, Mike, I know I really messed up. And that's what we really have to work on. But one of the goals that I have, lifeline goals, is we have to get our society in alignment with we've heard this a lot over COVID, right? Over the last 2 years. Follow the science. How many times have you ever heard that? Follow the science, follow the science. Well, it's funny that we say that in every area except when we talk about addiction. Nobody's following the science. It really is feelings-based. It really is feelings-based. And we're not serious about addressing it. We are not, because we are taking no steps to stop the flow of drugs coming into the country. So I feel like if our society truly understood the extent of this problem and how debilitating it is to the nation as a whole, we would be taking much more proactive action towards stemming this. And then with the people that are in addiction, really drilling on what this is and finding effective ways to prevent it from happening. Because after all, and as well as I do, Lillie, the relapse rate leaving treatment facilities is extraordinarily high. We do not have a high success rate and people who do go to treatment. And you and I both know that a small fraction of the people that need to go to treatment in the first place ever go. And then only a fraction of them get well once they do leave. And we need to do a better job, I think, in addressing why that is and coming up with better methods.
Well, like you were saying, just kind of adding on to what you're saying. So, when you're in the treatment center, right, it's a controlled environment, right? So it's consistency of thought, and everything is there to support the patient and the issues that they're dealing with. But when they leave the treatment center, then they're back to where they were before. You still have a lot of confusion. There's this disease versus moral issue. You might come back to a family home where they don't believe in the disease model. It's all about morality. So then you're brought back into that, and that confusion is brought back in. So you're mentioning about what do we do beyond that? I think, Mike, because there's so much confusion out there, you have to stay the course and continue to push and educate the public on what addiction is. Because there's so much confusion out there, and addicts who want to get better are maybe in the treatment center, they're good, and then they leave and then they get confused again.
Yeah. So we have to stay the course.
Yep.
We really do. And we will continue on with this mission. And that's what we've done in these 100 episodes. And we're going to do that for 100 more, maybe even several hundred more. We don't know. But that's what we're going to do. But Lillie, I know we've been here for a while, but thank you so much for coming back on the program.
Thanks, Mike.
And will you come back on?
Sure will.
Okay, next time you're going to bring us a cake and
Sure,
we're going to have a party.
I won't forget.
Okay, good, because I'm holding a resentment over the fact that you didn't bring a cake and celebrate this. And thanks again for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
And this episode has been sponsored by FHE Health. According to SAMHSA, first responders are 30% more likely to develop behavioral health conditions like PTSD. FHE Health specializes in getting first responders better and cleared for duty. So find out more at FHEhealth.com. So as I always like to say, listen, we don't represent any group here. I know we've talked about Al-Anon, we've talked about AA, but we don't actually represent those groups. Those are just programs that we're involved in, and you pick any program that works for you. If I've said anything that doesn't apply to you, or Lillie has said to you it doesn't apply to you, then just discard it. But try to take something away from what we've talked about that can help you, because it's helped us along the way. So with that, please visit our Facebook page, which is Recovery is Possible, and our website, which is VanMeterWellnessSolutions.com. Let me know how I'm doing, and let me know if there's a topic that you're interested in hearing about, because I'd love to hear from you. And you guys, take care. Stay the course, as Lillie says. Keep plugging away, and we will talk with you soon.